Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and who could say exactly when it happened, but at some point, I was griping and going on and on about time travel movies, and my old man grouchiness about how time travel movies wreck everything. Is time travel, it obliterates one of the necessary plot devices to make a story move forward, and that is the time crunch. You got to have some kind of time crunch. I suppose like Hallmark movies and dramas and stuff like that, sometimes the time crunch will just be, oh, we all get old and die. But for the most part, think about it. Romantic comedies, action shows, everything in between, there's always like a thing that's coming up and it's going to happen. And we got to solve the problem or become who we're going to become before that thing gets there. There's this orientation that all of the characters have toward this upcoming event, and that time crunch, that upcoming event, justifies their action. It makes what they do explicable, and it makes the plot happen. It makes the story go around. When you add time travel, it just ruins everything. You can just go back and do it all again, or you have to cook up some stupid contrivance about, oh, we only have so many of the pills that you can take to go back in time because we forgot to grab the others. There's only so many PIM particles. You can't get any more of those. It's just, there's only so much power the flux capacitor. You can only do it once. Whatever. It's just better to not have time travel. It's a nice thought exercise, but it doesn't work because it wrecks the time crunch, and time crunch is what makes characters behave in ways that are believable. Likewise, the Bible, even though it's a super long time ago, it has a time crunch that it anticipates. There's a timeline on things. There's a culminating event. The same way that in that rom-com, you've got a thing that has to be worked out before the wedding, and the wedding's on Saturday. Or in that military movie, it's like, we got to get this thing fortified before the Nazis get here, and they're only 2 miles away. Well, in Matthew chapter 24 and 25, Jesus is talking about a time crunch, and we, speaking of time, have spent quite a bit trying to understand what he's driving at there. If you don't understand the time crunch, the behavior of the characters through the rest of the New Testament, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Moving forward, they seem to be motivated by their love and affection for their king, their God, their Lord, but they also seem to be motivated by a certain urgency. They got to do some stuff before they die. They got to do some stuff before the end of things, before the unfolding of time, before the big reckoning, before the big event, before the wedding on Saturday, metaphorically speaking. And so in chapters 24 and 25, the time crunch is being introduced. There is an end to things. The Son of Man, that's Jesus' favorite term for himself, is going to return at some point. And the expectation is that people who are anticipating that return should have a rough idea that we're moving in that direction, that history is moving forward, and you can kind of see stuff coming together that points to that. And then ultimately at the end of chapter 24, paraphrase his mind, Jesus is like, this isn't like one of the time crunches that you get in certain movies where it's like there's an event and it happens at 6 p.m. on Friday night and we got to be ready. This is a little bit more open-ended, but the event is still coming. The thing is still going to happen. And then for the last portion of chapter 24 and everything we've seen so far in chapter 25, he is laying out the importance of the character motivation, that being there's a time crunch, there's a thing. You got to be eyes up. You got to be ready. You got to be anticipating this, because all of this is going somewhere. All of this is heading toward culmination. And so when we get to the parable of the talents, as tempting as it may be to discuss this parable as a life lesson, kind of an individual, existential, like, make sure to work hard and try, we have to choose to go beyond that and interpret it in light of the context, and the context is this topic of the time crunch. So in Matthew 25:14, Jesus says, "Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them." Again is a big hint word, which means that whatever he said right before that is something that he is still talking about. I don't want to say right before that. I got a Bible, turn the page. Oh, that's a parable of the 10 virgins, remember? I secretly remembered that was all me being theatrical. And let me see, this previous parable in the beginning of 25 starts with, "At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like." At that time, the kingdom of heaven? Well, what time are we talking about here? Let me back it up in chapter 24 and verse 42. "Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come." That's what that time is. So all of this is still talking about rolling up toward the return of the Son of Man. And so I guess this parable of the talents then is best interpreted as one more of these stories meant to orient followers of Jesus to be anticipating his return and living in a way that makes sense in light of the fact that there is a big culminating event that will happen at some point. And I really think in light of all of that, this becomes infinitely interpretable. So he calls in these 3 servants. It says to one he gave 5 talents of money. Remember, we figured out yesterday, what did we say? That's going to be like 325 pounds. It's like a ton of modern money. Even if we assume it's silver, if it's gold, it's even more. And so then to another servant, he gave 2 talents, which is still a crazy amount. And to another, 1 talent, each according to his ability. Okay, so now we got 3 interpretive pieces out on the table. We've got the fact that contextually, this is an extension of what Jesus has been talking about. This is meant to help us better understand the orientation of the follower of Jesus to the time crunch, because there is a thing that's coming up. Cool. And now element number 2 is a relatively familiar situation because we've seen this come up in other parables already. You've got a master that would seem to represent God, and you've got servants that would seem to represent people who follow that God, and there is a delay. Remember, we talked about the delay motif, this idea that the master is still very much the master. Things are still tended, but there's going to be a journey. There's going to be a reason that some time elapses here, and it would be impossible in this culture to know exactly how much time is going to elapse. But I mean, for crying out loud, this master has a household. He has servants. He's got gigantic mountains of gold and silver sitting there. He's clearly very invested in what's going on back at home. He's definitely going to come back. We don't know exactly what his business is, so the delay theme indicates that though the master's return is certain because of his level of investedness, we don't know exactly when. And so the certainty and the lapsing of time informs the behavior of the people he's invested in. So thing number 1 we got sitting out there is that we know where it fits contextually. Thing number 2 is this familiar arrangement, master, servants, all of that. Thing number 3 is that they are each vested with some of the master's wealth to do things that are good for the master's household, and that the master has evaluated their skill sets and he has given them resources to work with in light of that. Tomorrow, I want to talk about the equitability or lack thereof of this master's move to give some people more stuff based on his evaluation of their skill set. I want to talk about what that says about the master, what that says about the master's game plan and priorities, and what that says maybe even about the servants. I think that's going to take us to some really interesting places, but this parable on its surface in context, it's already taken shape. It's not that tough. There's a time crunch. The Son of Man is returning. There is a certain orientation that needs to happen for people who are eagerly anticipating and serving that king. There is an urgency because time crunch, every day you're getting closer to it. And there's an activism that's required. You have to go do something. You can't just wait and eventually it'll happen and then that'll feel better. Clearly, Jesus' teaching is indicating like, no, you're going to have to be shrewd, innocent, clever. You're going to have to figure out ways to use the resources and opportunities you've been given to advance this thing that you are a part of, that you are vested in. And as I've said probably a couple times already, that to me is why I love this parable, because it's scary and it's also energizing. Looking forward to talking more about that, each according to his ability concept tomorrow. Thanks a ton for hanging out with me. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.